to give us his thoughts is National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. It's Mark Fairhurst. Good afternoon to you, Mark. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News. So your reaction really to these possible plans of sending prisoners to Estonia?
It doesn't make any sense at all. It's unnecessary. It's an absolutely ridiculous idea. It'll cost the taxpayer vastly more than it currently does to incarcerate people. And by the way, it's unnecessary because in 3 days' time, we're going to be releasing at least 2,500 prisoners, which will give us some much needed breathing space.
So do you think early release schemes are the solution then, in part, to deal with this?
I think the early release schemes that have been introduced by this government have been the only option available to them because of the mess we were left in by the former government. So we need a long-term strategy moving forward to reduce the prison population, but we need to stabilise our prisons and we need a chance to rehabilitate people. We're not getting that at the moment. We're just dealing with human warehouses.
Give us a sense of the state of prisons in England and Wales, from what you know.
So the majority of prisons, particularly the inner city Victorian jails, are vastly overcrowded. So prisoners are being forced to share a cell, which was only designed for one. So there's 2 people in a small squalid cell. Because the maintenance contracts were privatised, it's been a complete and utter catastrophe. So you can't get any repairs done. Prisoners are living in squalor. We haven't got enough activity spaces to rehabilitate people and give them work skills. So staff are under a lot of pressure because they're on the front line, bearing the brunt of prisoners' frustrations, which all too often spill over into violence against staff.
So what do you think is the solution then? The government and the Foreign Office are saying prison conditions in Estonia are fairly good. It's a solution to easing the crisis, they say, that we're seeing in prisons. Do you know much about the situation in Estonia and what conditions are like there?
Well, I'm not really interested in the conditions in Estonia. This is an unworkable plan which will create more issues than it cures. What jurisdiction are they going to be under in Estonia? Are British prison officers expected to supervise them or Estonian prison officers? What about the language barriers? What about the costs? What about family ties? How do they get family visits in Estonia? What happens if I open a cell door and say to somebody, pack your kit, you're going on a plane to Estonia, and they refuse? Are we going to restrain people on planes? Is that the job of the border force, the prison service, or the police? It's an absolutely nonsensical idea which won't work.
What do you think's behind this idea?
I think it's a panic measure. I think people are creating a headline where one doesn't exist because we're going to create 5,000 spaces minimum in the next 2 months. So we didn't really need to consider this at all.
Funding into prisons is never really a popular idea for voters at least, but essentially the prison system needs a hell of a lot of money.
It does, and it's been neglected by consecutive governments over the last 30 years. But we've already got £4 billion of taxpayers' money set aside by Labour to build new prisons. And what I would like to see is the new build prison programme scrapped in its entirety and that money ploughed back into the public sector so we can modernise the entire prison estate, we can recruit additional staff, we could even fund probation so they could robustly manage prison sentences in our communities. And what about providing extra secure mental health beds in our communities so we can rid our prisons of people with acute mental health conditions? That £4 billion can go a long, long way. So there are a lot of options available to us. And while we're talking about foreign jails, we've got 10,000 foreign national offenders swallowing away in our prisons at a great cost to the taxpayer. It might be an idea to repatriate them to their own countries.
Mark, what I'm hearing is you're requesting, you feel that there needs to be a lot of reform of the prison system. If those changes aren't made, if that investment isn't made, where do you see things going in the future?
Well, the own government's experts project that by the end of this decade, we'll be knocking on 100,000 people incarcerated. It's okay building new prisons, but where are you going to get the staff to run them? Because nobody wants to join the job. And those new recruits we do train, after a whole 6 weeks, by the way, soon leave. Most of the staff leave within 2 years of service. So nobody wants to work in a prison. It's too violent, the retirement age is too high, and the wages are too low.
Are you talking to government at the moment? Are you able to feed back the concerns you have?
They're well aware of our thoughts, and we have regular meetings with them. So we're just waiting for the government to sit down with us and come up with a long-term strategy, because we're not the problem, we're the solution.
And your thoughts and messages to them then about this Estonia exchange?
Listen, come up with a more viable plan that's not going to cost the taxpayer a great deal of money. And let's use our common sense. Go to the doctor and get the common sense chip put back in your brains and scrap this nonsensical, ridiculous, expensive idea.
And on that note, we will leave it there. Mark Fairhurst, National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. Thank you.
You're very welcome.